Good morning everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of the build series. Last time, we didn't exactly go crazy, we just dipped our toes in the water. Today, we're tearing down the engine. Originally, this episode was supposed to be all about suspension, but that's still very much a work in progress. So, instead of waiting around, we're pivoting to something else in the meantime. As you can probably tell from the length of this video, this is going to be a longer episode. But honestly, it's the part we've all been looking forward to. Like I mentioned in the last episode, one of the main reasons why we started this build was to actually understand how an engine works, and there's really no better way to learn than getting your hands dirty and tearing one apart. Now, as a quick disclaimer before anyone heads to the comment section, we didn't start with the perfect untouched engine. This came from our Craigslist project, so a lot of things were already handled before it came into our possession. We're talking things like cut lines and missing bolts. So, this won't exactly be a step-by-step or a how-to. However, we still captured the core essence of the teardown process, so you'll get a solid look at how everything comes apart, more or less in the right order. We kick things off with a valve cover. Nothing too wild here, just working our way around, removing all the visible nuts and loosening everything up. It was a pretty standard start. The ignition coils came out super easily, and before we could actually lift the valve cover, we had to disconnect a couple hoses running over to the throttle body. Nothing complicated, just a few things in our way. And here it is, the first look inside. This thing was really clean. There was no sludge, which was a huge relief because this engine supposedly only has around 30 to 50,000 miles on it. If we popped this thing open and saw sludge, I probably would have just turned off the camera and gone home. From there, we moved on to the throttle body. And after getting that out of the way, we started disconnecting a few more hoses to open things up. Next up was the intake manifold, and this is where things get a little tighter. There's not a lot of room to work with, so having a wrench and a universal wobble extension makes life way easier when you're trying to reach those awkward bolts.
set off into the summer night, and you're never gonna see us again. set off into the summer night, and you're never gonna see us again. We went looking for
And of course, don't forget the hose in the back.
never gonna see what we found. We went looking for a new sound, and you're never gonna see what we found.
Alright, now we're switching over to the other side of the engine and starting on the exhaust manifold. Nothing too surprising here, just working our way through the bolts and getting things freed up.
Never gonna see us again.
Then we bounced back over to the intake side to unplug the starter cables and the knock sensor. At this point, it's a bit of a back and forth, just chasing anything still connected.
How could I know it would be goodbye, my love? When did the close of forever come, my love?
The alternator actually came off super easily. It just needed a pry bar to convince it a little, and it came right out.
Where did the spark go, the warmth that once stole?
Next, we started working through the accessories, beginning with the idler pulley. After that, we moved on to the water pump. The bolts sit behind the pulley, so you just rotate the pulley until you can access each one and zip them out. Pretty straightforward once you see it.
It seems the glow from within your eyes is gone. I never knew they could also lie.
There are also a handful of bolts holding on the water housing, but same story there, nothing too difficult, just a bit of time to unbolt things.
I need to know, must I live in this lonely world?
Then we pulled the starter, which in our case was only being held in by one bolt. So yeah, we'll be adding a second starter bolt to the part list. From there, we kept removing wiring harnesses and brackets to clear the way for the timing chain cover. It was just a lot of small stuff that adds up.
Once we were with endless fire, now we part. No more desire, silent nights. We can't.
The engine mount came off next, which was nice and straightforward. After that, the oil filter was up. This thing did not want to come off. We actually had to use some channel locks to break it loose, and I would show you that, but I completely forgot to hit record. So just imagine us fighting with it for a minute and then eventually getting it loose. Whoever installed it last definitely didn't believe in hand tight. And here, I'm pretty sure this is the water outlet passage. If I'm wrong, I'm sure someone in the comments will let me know. At this point, having an engine stand was an absolute game changer. It made it super easy to flip the engine over and start working on getting the oil pan off. Now, if it looks like this oil pan came off way too easily and you're thinking, that seems a little suspicious, you'd be right. Normally, this thing requires you to separate the sealing gasket. While I specifically asked my apprentice mechanic Joe Blow not to start without me, he went ahead and pulled the pan off anyway. So we actually had to bolt it back on just so I could film him taking it off again. The pan came off pretty clean, and technically we could reuse it, but we're planning to upgrade to a better oil pan anyways. Next up is the oil pump. Same story here, we're planning to swap this out for an upgraded unit to get better oil flow. Right underneath that is the windage tray, which I'm told helps manage oil movement inside the engine.
We could be 100 miles apart, but it's never far. Yeah, you show me colors, light in the darkness. You were the only thing I need.
Now, going into this next part, we had heard a lot of horror stories about how stubborn crank bolts can be, so we wanted to be prepared. We picked up a proper weighted impact socket. You can see how thick the walls are on this thing, and we paired it with a Milwaukee high torque on what I like to call tornado mode. And honestly, it zipped the bolt off like butter. Removing this plate gives you access to the timing chain tensioner, which was quite satisfying to pry off.
I'm so in love with you. Leaning on- I'm so in love with you. Love is dead. I'm so in love with you. I'm so in love with you.
Now we're moving on to the timing chain cover, and don't overlook this big bolt in the middle. It takes a bit more effort than the rest to get off.
I'm so in love with you.
The timing chain cover itself is sealed with Honda Bond, so you'll need something to break that seal. We found a putty knife worked a lot better than a pry bar or a razor blade for splitting the seams cleanly.
I'm so in love with you. Cleaning martyrs. I'm so in love with you. Love is I'm so
With that off, we can finally get into the timing components, starting with the chain and guides, which for some reason kind of looks like a human spine to me. This here is the oil chain guide, and yeah, don't use a 1/4 inch ratchet here like we did. It's on there super tight and it's a great way to snap a tool. My mechanic Joe Blow just didn't know any better. From there, we pulled the cam gear. Here's a little ASMR of us cracking loose the cam caps. To break the bolts loose, we worked in a star pattern, starting from the outside and moving inward. Once everything's out, we remove the cam caps and camshafts with the help of a rubber mallet. After this, the rocker arm assembly should come free, though in our case it needed a little encouragement with a pry bar. And finally, we moved on to the head bolts. These things are on there tight, so here's a little ASMR of us breaking them loose. Again, we worked in a star pattern, starting from the outside and moving inward to remove those bolts. Now we've got access to the valve springs, keepers, and retainers, so it's time to start pulling those out. We picked up a valve spring tool for this part, and you know how sometimes you use a tool and think, wow, whoever designed this is a genius. Yeah, this is not one of those tools. My apprentice mechanic Joe Blow may or may not have skipped the research phase on this part, so we made a quick run to Harbor Freight and grabbed whatever they had. Let's just say, it technically works. We had to modify the tool by shaving off the ears on the side just to get clearance around the valve springs. The idea is simple. You use the tool to compress the spring, you apply pressure up top, and then you use a magnet to pull out the keepers. In reality, the tool slips a lot. It ended up taking us about 3 hours to get through 15 valve springs, which is not ideal. I'll roll in a clip of what usually happens. It's just constant slipping. It's unreliable and loves to pop off at the worst possible moment. So instead, I'd strongly recommend a much simpler and honestly more effective method. All you really need is a socket, a hammer, and a very precise tap. We only learned of that method on our very last valve spring, but it worked like a charm. You'll see the difference right away. It's faster, easier, and way less frustrating than fighting with that valve spring tool we bought. After the valves, we pulled the spark plugs, which was quick and easy, and then separated the head from the block.
Lacking all emotion, staring down the barrel, waiting for the final gates to open to a new tomorrow. Moving with the motion, following the light that sets me
Removing the valves themselves ended up being simple and straightforward. We plucked them out with ease. The bracket down at the bottom of the engine is the AC bracket, so we went ahead and got that out of the way as well. And as an FYI, the threads on these two bolts were pretty long. When we moved on to the flywheel, we ran into a bit of an issue. It kept spinning when we tried using a ratchet. So instead of fighting it, we switched over to an air impact, and that made life way easier. It spun the bolts right off without needing to figure out how to hold the flywheel in place. After that, we removed the oil filter heat shield. Then we moved on to the bolts for the girdle, or also known as the bed plate, to separate it from the block.
Jimmy at Woodstock. Drum me around in your red Ford. Shivers down my spinal cord. Oh. 'Cause you got me holding. Even if I lost all my money, the zero runs deep, honey. And I don't need to speak a single word. 'Cause you got me holding. Even if my jokes sound funny, my tongue tied up on it.
The rod caps were a little stubborn even after the bolts were out, but with a rubber mallet and a bit of finesse, we were able to work them loose without too much trouble.
Staring down the barrel, waiting for the final gates to open. To
We tapped on the ends of the rods with a screwdriver and pry bar to push the pistons out. Normally, you'd want to be a little bit more careful here, but since we're planning on replacing the pistons and rods anyways, Joe Blow wasn't exactly losing sleep over marring things up.
We set off into the summer night, and you're never gonna see us again. We set off into the summer night, and you're never gonna see us again. We went looking for a new sound, and you're never gonna see what we found. We went looking for a new sound, and you're never gonna see what we found. And you're never gonna see what we found. And you're never gonna see us again. We set off into the summer night, and you're never gonna see us again. We set off into the summer night, and you're never gonna see us again. We went looking for a new sound, and you're never gonna see what we found. We went looking for a new sound, and you're never gonna see what we found. And you're never gonna see what we found. And you're never gonna see what we found. And you're never gonna see us again.
After pulling the pistons, the next step was removing the bolts that hold the bed plate to the block. There are quite a few of them, so it's just a matter of working your way through methodically from the outside in. Once all the bolts are out, the bed plate should separate from the block, though, like most things on this engine, it may take a little persuasion to get it moving. Finally, we pulled the camshaft, the creme de la creme of the K24. It's in great shape with no unusual wear or damage, which was good for us because we're planning on reusing this piece in our build. Here, we're removing the remaining bearings from the block and bed plate, and this part was super easy. We had a couple stubborn studs left in the block, so it was time for the good old 2-nut trick. Thread 2 nuts on, lock them together, and suddenly the stud backs right out like it was never stuck in the first place. And finally, we wrap things up by removing the thrust washers, bringing us to the end of the teardown. Now, onto my favorite part, the damage. As a quick note, I forgot to include this $150 charge for the engine hoist and stand in episode 0, so consider this me balancing the books a little late. For episode 2, the teardown itself didn't cost too much. We picked up an eTorque socket set for the rod caps, a valve spring compressor tool, and a proper socket for the crank bolt. Nothing too crazy individually. But yeah, the total cost is only going to go up from here. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.